Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us in this webinar for the Teacher Effectiveness Series. Today's webinar is on the mentoring of new teachers and is being hosted by the Regional Educational Laboratory of the Mid-Atlantic. I'm Elizabeth Greniger, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. I'm a managing associate at EdCount, which is a women-owned small business dedicated to working with states, school districts, and other agencies to develop high-quality standards, assessment, and accountability systems that enable our clients to better serve all students. Our featured presenter today is Ellen Moir, New Teacher Center, and I'll be sharing some more info about her shortly. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar series is hosted by the Regional Educational Laboratory of the Mid-Atlantic. The REL Mid-Atlantic serves education stakeholders in 4 states: Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia. The aim of the RELs is to respond to the education needs of the region by producing rigorous research, providing technical assistance, and disseminating useful and accessible research-based products. In our ongoing state of education improvement, educators and education stakeholders need access to the best research and analysis that will help them understand how to make improvements in education. Through activities like this webinar series and others, the REL Mid-Atlantic fully intends to support these improvement efforts. The goals for this webinar series are to provide stakeholders in the Mid-Atlantic region and elsewhere with opportunities to discuss multiple topics within the field of teacher effectiveness and to increase participants' understanding of the use of research-based teacher effectiveness strategies. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Ellen Moir. Before founding the New Teacher Center, Ms. Moir was a classroom teacher, a supervisor and lecturer of teacher education, the director of the Student Teaching Program, and the director of teacher education, all at the University of California at Santa Cruz. Ms. Moir's wealth of experience in teacher education has helped her to build an exciting presentation for you today, so I'm now going to turn it over to her.
Hi everyone. I'd like to welcome you today to this webinar, and I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation to REL Mid-Atlantic and to Elizabeth with EdCount. It's really been a pleasure to work with you in building out this series. Before we get going, I thought it would be useful if we did a poll so that I could better understand who's in the audience. So you'll see a pop-up box come onto your screen with multiple choice questions. You should click one of the answer choices to indicate you're a professional. So are you an SEA, LA administrator, principal, teacher, or another stakeholder? It'd be great if you could respond to that, and then we'll be ready to get going. Good. It looks like we have a really diverse group. I don't see any principals, but we'll present a lot of principals. No, hopefully you'll be able to share some of this information with key leaders in your district after the webinar. So let's just really launch into today's event, and we're going to focus on 2 significant questions. What are effective mentoring models for new teachers, and how effective are they at retaining and improving teaching? And I think this is really important because we've had mentoring in education forever. But when we use the word mentoring, we mean different things. Some people mean it's just a buddy, anybody that's kind of in the school. And others now, after many years, I think there's a really strong body of research that's really going to starts to show the impact of a high-quality program. We're going to focus on the research that supports induction, the New Teacher Center solution. I'm going to get into the weeds, if you will, and really share with you what the model itself looks like, and then begin to look at our impact. So let's start off by looking at the research. First of all, the research is showing that teachers are the most important in-school factor in student learning. Now, I think many of you have been in the profession a while and probably agree with me on some level that we've known that for a long time. But great that research is sharing our opinion. And what we've done in these slides is actually give you the citing for the research, which is fantastic because when you want to go back into your district and make the case, or at the state level to make the case, you'll have all these various studies. Another study is, and several actually, are showing that teacher effectiveness significantly impacts student learning. So those are very similar, right? That the better our teachers are, the greater the impact on student learning. Now, new teachers are typically less effective than experienced teachers, and that Hanashek and his colleagues have been able to prove that in looking at various new teachers in cities in America. The new teachers then who really get a high-quality, comprehensive induction program are more likely then to be successful at having an impact on student learning than teachers who receive a low intensive impact. And that actually is a study that Steve Glazerman did with his colleagues at Mathematica. It was an experimental design, and I'll be getting into some of those findings later. And then school leaders are key to teaching and learning and retention. And, you know, this is something that we've known for a long time, but by getting this kind of research and really thinking together about, well, so then if principals are key in this work, what kind of support and development do they need over time so that they can keep the most talented teachers in all schools, but in our case we're looking really at the most challenging, the most underserved schools in the country. Just a few more aspects of research that I think are important to look at. You know, induction programs offer the beginning teachers need to develop into educators capable of teaching in today's high standards. So, you know, the research is showing, Kendall Stansbury and others, you know, look, if we're going to induct new teachers, then we have to get them on the pathway from the beginning. So like right now, for example, Common Core standards, every district I know of, almost, except a few states, talking about Common Core standards. So those are standards that new teachers should be using. When we talk about social emotional learning, well-being, we should be embedding that kind of pedagogy and practice into the new teachers early and comprehensive approaches to education can reduce attrition by 50%. We're seeing that, you know, historically 36% of all new teachers leave the profession in the first 3 to 5 years. But we're seeing with a comprehensive approach, we're being able to reduce attrition dramatically. Support and assistance of beginning teachers have a positive impact on 3 specific outcomes. 1, teacher commitment and retention. We're able to show a shift in classroom instructional practices and in student achievement. And both Richard Ingersoll and Michael Strong have studied this, and Richard Ingersoll's work really is a body of research to tackle and look at because he definitely advocates for a more robust induction model. And then I believe it's Susan Moir Johnson that comprehensive induction positively influences the retention and development of new teachers, especially teachers in urban and hard-to-staff schools. Not just one-on-one mentoring. A comprehensive approach, which I'll be talking about today, is one-on-one mentoring plus, right? Plus a community of practice, grade-level teams, department teams, a principal that's engaged and active within a context of a district that's supportive around developing teachers. And finally, you know, there is a return on the investment. Research by Anthony Diar and Michael Strong have shown that if a $1 upfront investment in high-quality comprehensive induction is going to yield a return of $1.66 after 5 years. Now, we've used this a lot also because, you know, sometimes the district says to us up front, it's too expensive for us to invest in a comprehensive model the way you're describing it, which is really about releasing exemplary teachers full-time. And I say, but it's too expensive for you not to think about a solution to improving the quality of education for students in your district. So there's a huge body of research out there. I hope that you'll find those 8 or 9 studies that I've just quickly overviewed. You can go in depth by reading them and really come forward with a case. I call it a case for induction of new teachers in the state or systems that you're working in. Let me now kind of circle to let you know why this matters so much to me personally and how I think about this work. So I have really loving parents. But my mother didn't graduate from high school, and my father barely. And my parents really, in the late 60s, they thought I could be a housewife or a secretary, with housewife taking the home run. And I had this amazing high school Spanish teacher. Her name is Miss Hayward. And she said to me one day, in my junior year of high school, Elena, hablas español como mexicana. ¿No quieres ser maestra bilingüe? She said, Ellen, you speak Spanish like a native Spanish speaker. Might you not want to consider being a bilingual teacher? I'd never thought about being a bilingual teacher, nor did I ever realize that I had a good accent and that I was great at Spanish. That letter that you saw on the prior slide was a letter that she sent me when I was in Mexico studying Spanish. She helped me go to Mexico after my senior year in high school and then continued to write me letters constantly over the 2 months that I was in Mexico. And that kind of encouragement lifted my life. So when I think about, how I'm seated here before you, really as an ordinary person, I'm reminded that my high school Spanish teacher lifted my life, and I want to make sure that every child in this country, every single one, has their life lifted by a talented teacher. I love teachers. I think teachers are the cornerstone of America and of our democracy. And I see them as the rock stars of this country, and I wish that they were compensated like all the other rock stars that we seem to acknowledge. So that's how my journey began. And then I had the privilege of working in as a director of teacher education, as you heard Elizabeth share earlier. And I could see that the best and the brightest graduates that we were working with, right, we turned them out. We had 50 candidates. We selected them from 350 prospective students that wanted to get their teaching credential. I could see that the top of the 50, the best and the brightest, were the ones that wanted to quit earliest as school began in their first year of teaching. So I just year after year was standing in front of new cohorts of student teachers, and I said to myself, I have to solve for this problem of when they're out in the schools, they want to quit so quickly. Is there anything that I could do to help our graduates? That's the candidates I knew, right? Is there anything I could do to help our graduates stay longer? So I'll share the model with you in a minute, but let me just restate that, for teachers in this country, we still lose 50% in the first 5 years, and it's like a revolving door, and the truth is that the same group of students are abandoned year after year. So, kids and students in our schools, in our most underserved schools, begin to think, well, why should I try? You're not going to last, teacher, and I'll be here long after you, and we're kind of throwaway. You don't care about us. So I'm bound and determined to think about this, especially in light of having 2 million teachers are going to be needed in 2020. New teachers are disproportionately assigned to low-income students, and that is just compounding the educational inequities that we have. 46% of all new teachers leave in 5 years. And U.S. schools spend close to $7.3 billion a year on teacher turnover. So, that return on investment slide that I showed you earlier, that's hugely important. If we can change this up and keep teachers longer and help them be better faster, we're going to be saving a lot of money, and we're going to be contributing significantly to improving learning for students. So I'm really thinking about a nested approach, right? You have to, these areas that you see on this slide, whether it's in the classroom between a teacher and a student, or it's at the state policy level, we have to be congruent and aligned. So the New Teacher Center has really been focused over the last 15 years at not only helping new teachers in their classroom change their practice and get off to a good start and be on the path to excellence early, but we've been also trying to create better teaching and learning conditions in schools, and we've been trying to really build out district coherence and then coherence at the state level, policies that actually help new teachers. And, I'm reminded of something. I started in California years ago in 1988. There was an RFP from the State Department that said, we're losing so many new teachers. We really need innovative models for keeping them longer. So I joined with a group of colleagues in our county, in our area, and built out a model that's called the Santa Cruz New Teacher Project. Now that program was one of 13 pilots in California. Actually, 26 years later, it's still in existence. But the point I want to make is California tried to roll out a state policy and induction programs across the state. When you grow from 13 programs in a state to 150, you're scaling, first of all, I think, that's huge scale, right? And oftentimes it's hard to keep quality. And what's really happened after all these years, unfortunately, is in some pockets, the programs have become so bureaucratized that teachers don't really want to be part of them. So as we think about this work, we need to be always asking ourselves, when I was a new teacher, would this kind of instructional support have helped me? As I know new teachers in our district or in our state, is what we're developing going to give them the habits of mind that they need to be successful? Or, might these be considered, or might they be considered sort of hoops and hurdles that new teachers go through? So I think getting a system, getting a nested approach within a state and within a district and within a school and then to the classroom is hugely important. So let me share a little bit more specifically and take a look at our model. But before I do, it seems like it would be great to kind of get your sense of what are some of the elements that you think really make up an effective induction program. So again, you're going to see the pop-up, and we're conduct another poll. And if you could, answer those questions, check as many of the boxes as you want that you think are essential for a really good, solid induction program. I can see you're all at it. Thank you. It's great. So, that's kind of our what do we call it, KWL, right? Like what do you bring to this? What do you already know? How do we draw on the knowledge that you're bringing today? So let me go into depth now and let me just share some of these elements in a little bit of in greater detail, and then we'll kind of connect to what you've just said. But I think you're looking like you think most of those areas are important, with perhaps building principal capacity, perhaps at the lowest level. I would have said that too years ago. I hope I can convince you by the end of this talk that principal capacity might be as important as any of the others. So here we go. So our induction model really looks at several elements, and the images that you see in blue and green on the left side of the slide illustrate some of the key elements of our program, and on the right side are the outcomes or are the impact that we're looking for in a high-quality induction program. I'm going to share this with you on several other slides so you'll kind of see this is our theory of change. But in the end of the day, we're looking at increasing teacher effectiveness, right? I mean, this is the purpose of this kind of a program. We want to increase teacher effectiveness. We want strong district human capital or strong district talent to lead this kind of work at every level. We want increased teacher retention, and of course, we want to be improving student achievement and student learning. And we think that all of those aspects in blue, the new teacher development, mentor development, You don't just say who wants to ment, right? Who'd like to mentor? And who has time on their timetable to mentor? No, it's like a really rigorous selection process, which I'll get into soon. You want good, solid leadership, strong principal capacity, and I would say you always want an impact plan to accompany any program you have. We want to be building our programs to be built to last. I'm pretty proud that the program we started in 1988 in our backyard is still going. And California has had many horrendous budget crises over the years. And we've gone from being one of the top states in America around student learning to, unfortunately, one of the toughest, worst, I would say. But regardless, I think in our backyard, we have a really, really strong induction program. So let me just say that, again, it's both. It's proven, it's effective. There have been a lot of research on it. We've got easily 20 years experience, I'd say longer. Although those first years, I don't know, those were like trial by fire, trying to figure it all out. And I think it was happening in my kitchen or something with 4 really talented teachers. But we're both face-to-face, and we've been doing a lot online. I'm not going to go into as much of a conversation about our online work, but I am happy to communicate with any of you offline at a later point. I just want to say to you that given that I was graduating from high school in the late 60s, right? Using an online vehicle for teaching teachers and for mentoring teachers probably wouldn't have been my first choice, or even I might not have even realized that it could be so powerful. But we've been mentoring new science teachers, new science teachers, so physics, chemistry, biology, you name it, new science and new math teachers online. We can find a rock star physics teacher anywhere in America. We can pair he or she up with a brand new physics teacher. And they carry on, and with the capabilities of technology now, they're also able to really see new teachers teaching, upload video, give just-in-time feedback. I say this to you because as you think about your program, also think about how technology could be an asset in driving for the kind of change that you're trying to create. This next slide is going to kind of break up our theory of action a little bit more. And now I get to kind of go into each of these different areas. Again, looking at the right side still at what the impact we're trying to have is, right? All with an eye on improving student learning and student achievement. So mentor development. Now, when I was teaching, we had mentoring. I think we've had mentoring forever. But I would say it used to be what I'd call a buddy system, right? And I remember even when I was teaching that, my mentor put a cupcake in my box one day and said, have a good day, or, I got a card here or there, some empathy, but I really didn't get any instructional support. And honestly, I'm embarrassed to tell you, I was teaching first grade. What's the most important subject that you have to teach in first grade? Reading, right? Literacy. And I didn't start my reading program until January. I have no idea what I was doing from September through December, but no one was there to really guide me, and those poor first graders that I had to wait till January. Hopefully I could catch them up between January and June. But what we're trying to do here is find the most exemplary teachers in your district. I'm going to use district. You could use state. You could use charter network, but I'll just use district for now. So the reason we wanted this type of a model is because we felt that expert teachers in school districts weren't having enough opportunities to really teach teachers how to teach. In education, we spend $7 billion on PD for teachers. A lot of that professional development is professional development that teachers themselves don't like. And we get these outside experts or vendors who haven't taught in decades. Now, I like many of them. They're great people. But I have a vision for our profession where expert teachers are tapped. They're carefully selected, rigorous selection. They're tapped, and then their full-time job is to teach new teachers how to teach. So in our model, exemplary teachers are released on a full-time basis. And they have a caseload of beginning teachers, 15 preferably, sometimes 14, sometimes 16. And they are matched by subject area whenever possible and grade level whenever possible. And then new teachers have someone in their classroom every week over the course of their first 2 years. I'll come back to the notion of 2 years because we have found, and research is showing, that 1 year is not enough. So we get the mentors, and then we carefully select them, and then we have ongoing professional development for the mentors, because what we're really trying to do is help the mentors acquire the skills and knowledge and capabilities for teaching new teachers how to teach. We also work really closely with the site principal, because what we have found is that if a principal values a program like this, right, because here you have a mentor coming into the school, wanting to meet with the principal on a regular basis, helping all the new teachers in his or her school, particularly at the elementary, and sometimes there's multiple mentors, of course, at the secondary level. But we want that principal buy-in, and more importantly than that, we want the principal to create the conditions for adult learning and professional learning, and a place where teachers are feeling super supported and where there's energy and focus on learning. So we do work with principals in terms of a training in terms of their role as an instructional leader, how to build PLCs, how to actually observe and give feedback. I mean, what you start to see is that the mentors have a kind of capability that the principals may not have yet developed. And so it's really trying to share, not cross into evaluation, but to really help principals be better at their role. And as a part of this whole theory of action, and to advance beginning teacher practice, we really want to make sure we have ongoing weekly support of those new teachers. Not just, hey, call me when you need help, or I'll be around in a week or two. But this is steady, focused, in-classroom support, co-teaching, co-assessing, doing demonstration lessons, giving feedback, observing feedback, planning, in integrating Common Core, all of the kinds of things that new teachers need to know and be able to do. Instead of having to wait until January to learn those kinds of things, they are given a chance to achieve and to be successful from the very, very beginning. So this kind of an onboard approach, or an approach where you come in, you're given the key to the class, and it's sink or swim. No, that's no more. Instead, you're given the key, you're given the mentor, and off you go together. And within a week of working with new teachers, you start to hear the words we. Look at what we're creating. That's hugely important because new teachers feel extremely isolated, and they start to get insecure, which I'm going to talk with you about in a few minutes as well. That once a new teacher loses their confidence and competence, it's really hard for them to regroup. And then equally important is who is leading the induction program. Look, learning to teach is about teacher development, right? It's about creating the context for a new learner to be successful. And you need to have a program leader or a department head or someone in charge of the program that actually believes in this learning process, that really believes in making mistakes, that looks at inquiry and feedback and the richness that happens when a novice and an experienced teacher are working together. And in order to really maximize these, we must have the conditions for success that are listed on the left. So, I've talked about some of these, but I'm going to just kind of highlight them one more time. Obviously, you don't want to be selecting anyone. Like, the only reason to put money into this approach is if you're going to really be sure that you've got an expert teacher. So you might be saying to yourself, what makes for an excellent mentor? Well, this kind of a selection process, we're constantly looking at those teachers. I mean, now, this isn't real research, but I think if I came to any of your schools and I said, give me the 2 top teachers in the school, we would find congruence and there would be validity to that action research, if you will. So we want to get the best teachers out of a district. We want them to be learners themselves. We want them to use assessment data to drive instruction. We're looking for leaders. We're looking for talented individuals who've worked with diverse student populations and who really are focused and passionate about helping new teachers improve their practice. When we can get a systems approach, as I shared earlier, it's like an engine in a district. All arrows aligned and focused. Strong site leaders, engaged stakeholders. Let me talk about that piece for a minute. We never go into a district. I shouldn't say never. Never and always are probably not the best terms to use. We rarely go into a district unless we have district labor management relations and buy-in. I want to make sure that the teachers union, the district administration, the teachers, board, entire system, all the stakeholders are eager to build a robust engine. Now, the reason this is so important to me is that it's all about being built to last. Now, that's a book I've read. Some of you read it as well, right? It's Jim Collins' book. And it's about business, and I'm not a business, and you're not a business exactly. But you know what? When we introduce new ideas and new initiatives into America's schools, and then we change our direction, right? Like you could have a superintendent come in, he or she wants to mix it up and bring in the flavor that they believe is the most important in the content, and then he or she may leave in 2 years and you get another, or 3 years, you get another superintendent, and they're going to change it up. In the end, really, we just create cynicism among colleagues in the education profession. And I'm looking to build our work to last. The teacher learning, teacher development, these are not going to pass. They're not a flavor, they're not a bumper sticker. They're about a professional educator coming into schools wanting to be the best that they can. And then finally, that all ties to the supportive context that we find our teachers in. Let me stop for a moment and pass this on to Elizabeth.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much for sharing all those details about NTC's model. I think that the theory of action certainly describes major factors impacting teacher effectiveness. And the role of mentors and supportive leaders are really crucial for our new teachers. But like you said, these efforts must be really systematic and intentional. So now we want to turn it over to the audience to get a sense of where you all are in your professional practice with respect to supporting new teachers. In just a moment, you'll see another poll with 4 answer choices pop up on your screen. This time you're only going to select one to let us know about what you're doing in your practice. So it looks like we have a range of experience here. Some people who are using a lot of these components, some people who are just really starting to think about this, and hopefully what you're learning today will help you to think more about it and to improve your practice. But we're going to spend some more time talking about really how to apply this in your own practice. So I think we're ready to move right along.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'm also seeing, as I had a chance to pick my head up for a minute, that some of you have been asking questions, and I'm going to try and embed the answers to those questions into this next piece. And then, of course, at the end, we're going to have plenty of time for questions, and I'm happy to respond. So I want to explain to you kind of the rationale for full release mentors in our face-to-face work. Why do we think it's so important? So I already articulated, I think, that you want to get the right people. You want to give them the kind of professional development they need. But tied to that, and you want to tap the wisdom and expertise of the best and the brightest so that you have a group of teacher educators really teaching teachers how to teach. So the mentors, by being released full-time, have a flexibility in their time, right? They're able to look at their caseload. They're able to go into new teachers' classrooms at different times during the week. They set up appointments in advance. They're able to observe and give feedback, and they're able to go 3 times in a week if they need to, if there's something that the new teacher really needs you to observe again or give more feedback. And basically, you really have a new role in the profession. You have expert teachers teaching new teachers how to teach. And, this is kind of world class, right? It's almost like you're having somebody beside you constantly, whose senior students, it's just in time, and it's contextualized to the teacher's own classroom. Now, I want to highlight something important. If I were going to be doing a professional learning opportunity for all teachers, and new teachers were sprinkled in the mix, what we have found is that experienced teachers, because of all the experience they've had, they can generalize. They can imagine how you would extrapolate these ideas and build them into centers and create, online capabilities and blended learning and how to really differentiate. I mean, these are all important aspects of teaching and learning. New teachers have a hard time really imagining what they maybe haven't seen. So some of you might wonder, well, but these new teachers come out of pre-service programs. Well, they do, and I think you all would agree with me that there are excellent pre-service programs, there are very good ones, there are good ones, there are not so good ones, and there are plain not so good ones. And so regardless of the program that a new teacher, the pre-service program that a new teacher comes out of, most of those are simulated, right? You're working in a classroom with an expert teacher already, and that expert teacher has designed all of the classroom management and the curriculum and the strategies and the environment and everything. And so really, this is about lifting a new teacher's life from the moment they get the key to their classroom. And these expert mentors, when you're looking at really that criteria for selecting mentors, right, you can't just have anybody be a mentor. So in every city we work in, with every school district, I'm proud to say that the districts get it. Like they're saying, yes, let's really get the best and the brightest here, those that have the best interpersonal skills. I never match. We never go into a district and say, well, we should match Mary with Joe because they're going to get along better. We've never matched that way. We match by subject matter or by grade level, right? But these mentors have the capabilities of going across grades and across working with a diverse set of new teachers. So I also wanted to be sure, we wanted to be sure that the mentors were released full time so they could really have ongoing learning. So what we do is we bring the mentors together on a weekly basis or every other week basis for what's called mentor forums. So each mentor brings their portfolios with them, brings their collection of data about their new teachers, right? We have a host of assessment tools and can actually look at their caseload of new teachers and say, well, in my group of 15 new teachers, these 5 are, above standard, they're exceeding standards, these 5 are in the middle, and these 5 I'm kind of struggling with this particular teacher because of X, Y, and Z. And you can really kind of hone in on what is it that each of these new teachers need to move from good to very good to excellent. The mentor's getting the professional development. He or she has the time to dedicate and focus on new teachers, and it's a valued system approach, right? Many teachers in the country rarely have a chance to get out and see other teachers teaching. These mentors, we build in a 3-year rotational approach. So they have, in year 1 out of the classroom, we're talking about teachers that have been teaching 7, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. These expert teachers have a chance to step out of their classroom, really look around, see the bigger landscape, while still holding on tightly to what they're really good at in the teaching and learning arena. And many times when you get these expert teachers together, they don't really know, or they haven't had a chance to articulate and stop long enough to think about what it is that they do really well. And through this mentoring opportunity, they have those experiences, and the mentors come out as expert teachers, but after 3 years, they are expert teachers of teachers and really teacher leaders. They're professional leaders with a renewed commitment and with a renewed inspiration, with renewed hope and optimism, and having really seen the profession. I want to pause for a minute to tell you that this was really important to me on a personal level, not only because of Miss Hayward, but because at an early stage in my career, after I'd only taught 5 years, I was invited to UCSC to help UCSC build a better teacher ed program. And as I stayed there for, say, 2 or 3 or 4 years, and of course you could see from Elizabeth's introduction I stayed quite a bit longer, I kept hanging out with my friends that were teachers, classroom teachers. And some of my friends, and I'm going to say your friends, our teacher friends, they're smart, they're talented, they're energetic, they're passionate, they're going to make a difference in the world. That's why teachers teach. But some of my friends were becoming cynical. Some of my friends were becoming gray at the age of 30. Some of my friends were disillusioned because they didn't feel like they had a voice. I had a sense early on in my career that we could build a better profession. And in some ways, I think, using the talented expertise of these great teachers is a career lattice, isn't it? It's a career path. Like, yeah, you can teach kids. You can teach kids in classrooms for 30 years if you want. But I think that teachers also want other opportunities. And if you can get the best and the brightest, and they have dedicated time to really deliver on the promise, then we're going to get smarter new teachers, accelerate their development, keep them longer, improve student learning, and we're going to have a better core of expert teachers, a more talented core of expert teachers who have a set of skills and knowledge that oftentimes teachers don't have that opportunity to acquire. So in our work, we train these mentors to use formative assessment. And it's, really the formative assessment is a way of collecting data. The formative assessment tools and the assessments themselves shape the conversations between beginning teachers and mentors and really help us focus on the beginning teacher's growth. So what's working? What are the beginning teacher's challenges? We always start with what's working, by the way. On one of our, and probably some of you have seen this, we have something called the collaborative log, right? The mentor and the beginning teacher every week fill in their collaborative log. They look at what's working. They look at what the new teacher's challenges are. They look at the new teacher's next steps and the mentor's next steps. And what we see continually is that the new teacher's challenges, after a month or a few weeks of really honing in on those challenges, those become the successes. And new teachers are able to, I think, see in smaller chunks, right, how they are progressing. So it's pretty overwhelming to be a new teacher. I think it's kind of overwhelming in some ways to be a teacher in general, right? There's so much coming at teachers. But by using these assessment tools that really guide the mentor and beginning teacher, new teachers get a sense of their goals, how well they're reaching those goals, and the successes they're having. And this is the same kind of nested approach that I talked about earlier, where it really parallels what you want a new teacher to be teaching his or her students, right? So we want students that can set goals and reach those goals and know what their next steps are, and constantly in the continuous improvement model. So formative assessment has really played a huge role in our inquiry with teachers, in really engaging teachers in the thoughtful pursuit of getting better. Quite frankly, that's what this is all about, right? It's like we want to be the best that we can to improve student learning. And there's not a new teacher I know that doesn't want to be better than all the rest of us, right? They're out there, they're inspired, they're excited, they can hardly wait to do it better. And our opportunity is when you pair these brand new teachers up with an expert other, they're on a journey together. And that new teacher is offered the kind of support, instructional support, and emotional support that they need. And the mentor is re-inspired as he or she evolves over the course of the years. Let me now kind of look a little bit more at the key processes that we use in terms of instructional mentoring to be so that you can really see how we're linking so tightly teacher effectiveness, teacher quality with student learning, right? So again, the mentor-mentee planning standards-based instruction, right? Using ongoing assessment to drive teacher practice. Looking at analysis of student work. Like, which of my students are at standard, which are below, which are above, what are my interventions? It's very personalized. I think one of the problems around thinking about new teacher induction, new teacher support, is that it's easy to say, oh, we have 25 new teachers or we have 1,100. That's what Tampa, Florida has, 1,100. They all need classroom management. You know what? They don't. What they all need is a personalized approach to learning, just like our students need our teachers to know them well. We really teach our mentors, and actually our mentors teach us, how you know your students well and how to really diagnose their needs and then create interventions that really help new teachers and their students move from good to very good to excellent. Lots of observation and feedback. You know, I'm reminded once that when my son was younger and in high school and playing baseball, came home from school one day and he said to me, Mom, you know, the coach loves to yell out to me. He says, the coach will say, Jeff, step it up. And he said to me, what does step it up really mean? And you know, when I was teaching, I had a principal, lovely man who I liked him an awful lot. It could have been a lovely woman who I'd have also liked a lot. Could have been anyone. Nice job, Ellen. You're doing such a good job. But what specifically was I doing? What did my son need to learn to be able to really do better at his chosen sport? What did I need to know? What do new teachers need to know? They need very explicit feedback. Let's take a look at your pacing. Let's take a look at how you're engaging students. Do you realize that the back quarter of the class is not at all engaged? Do you realize that you're calling on all the boys and really forgetting the girls? Are you thinking about, you're looking for sort of one right answer in your questioning. Let's think about how to build higher order thinking and create an inquiry. And, you all know all of this that I'm saying. There's so much richness and depth and complexity to being a great, talented teacher. And we have a chance from the get-go to really teach new teachers how to teach. We're constantly looking for entry points for creating a strong professional culture in schools and for aligning high-quality teaching. So let me give you a couple examples. I mentioned one already, but I've actually mentioned two, but I'll share these with you. So on the very top, you can see our collaborative log. It pretty much does what I said. We always start with successes because the most conscientious and sometimes the best new teachers rarely see themselves as being successful. You're like, no. I'm working with 15 other new teachers, and last year I worked with 15 others, and the year before I worked with 15 others. I can tell you that the way you are creating your science lab is at the top of your game. Oh, it is? I had no idea. Whatever it is that the expert other is seeing, it helps be a mirror for teachers so that the teacher and the mentor can provide kind of a window, an inside view into the teacher's strengths. Think back a moment to when you were brand new. It's our first job maybe. Get the key to the class. We're so excited. We're not going to have parent complaints. We're not going to have discipline problems. We're going to be so good. But the truth is, teaching is hard. And right around October of their first year is when new teachers sink into a disillusionment phase. And they think about quitting. So having this expert other beside them, really using this collaborative log on a weekly basis, helps us hone in together on what's working. We also have an inquiry action plan that our teachers use. And it's focused on analyzing student work and really, again, honing in on on knowing your students well, and then disaggregating your data and creating your interventions. And then the other tool you'll see is on selective scripting. And selective scripting is that, you could have a mentor come into your room and actually be taking copious notes on what you see happening in the classroom. So these are 3 examples of our assessment tools. This is not like a checklist that says here are 10 assessment tools, use each one each week. This is like using the professional judgment of the expert mentor, and deciding which tools make the most sense when. However, having said that, we really use the collaborative log on a regular basis so that we can track progress of each new teacher. These assessment tools have proven to be invaluable, and if I could just say to you all, there's formative assessment and there's summative assessment. There's ways of measuring teacher effectiveness that are based solely on student achievement data. The New Teacher Center is a component of multiple measures, and we think that the more teachers can know about their craft and their practice, the better they're going to be over time. It's very, it's very oriented toward Common Core standards and towards really the most, and really 21st century teaching, right? That's our pedagogy. Our pedagogy is about engaging young people, making school a learning, a rigorous learning opportunity, but an engaged and while being extremely engaged.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was really great to see some of your tools and hear about this personalized approach and use of formative assessment to support teachers. And now we want to take a little bit of time to ask the participants to describe some examples of how they are using formative assessment in their work. So again, you'll see a box pop up. This time you'll get the opportunity to type in a brief response and share with us what you're doing in your experience as either a teacher leader, a teacher, what you're seeing that shows that formative assessment is being used to improve. I see that some folks are using reflections, online reflections. I see a lot more about reflection. Some people are talking about Danielson's framework. Peer visitation, visiting other teachers' classrooms. I see some others are using Danielson's framework.
Great. Before I go on, because I want to actually take us into looking at how we've been supporting principals. But before I do, I thought it would be useful to just say a couple of things. I think that, in our work, we also use Danielson framework, and we've aligned all of our assessment tools to our framework. We have our own framework, our own continuum of teacher development that we've aligned our resources to. In Hillsborough in Tampa, Florida, they have their mentors. So our mentors in our work are simply mentors, if you will, right? They're mentoring new teachers. In Hillsborough, the mentors are also trained in teacher evaluation. So that would be the case where I would have a group of new teachers that I'd be working with every week, just as I've described. And Elizabeth would have a group of new teachers, as she's thinking she's going to describe. No, and then Elizabeth and I would shift, right? We'd once a month, or rather, once a quarter, we'd swap our teachers, and I would then evaluate Elizabeth's teachers as part of their teacher evaluation system, and Elizabeth would evaluate mine. Now, I'm not seeing that model in very many places, but there are peer review and evaluation, peer assistance and review programs in which sometimes mentors are actually also evaluators. I think what I see in the chat that's really striking that I want to really hone in on is it's not easy to give rich feedback, right? It's not easy to observe and really identify the kinds of practices. I mean, you need a framework to go by. You need to make sure that you're looking at observable kinds of teaching practice and behaviors, and that you're giving that kind of rich feedback that's explicit that I was talking about earlier, and that really hones in. That notion of being a mirror is and letting teachers reflect and letting teachers try new ideas. When our mentors are in classrooms every single week, it's as if the new teacher doesn't even realize that the mentor's in the classroom, right? They're released full time, so they can be in every week, they can be in twice a week if they want. And, in some cases, some schools might have instructional coaches, or they may have a lead coach. And, I think each of you have to be thinking about what's going to work best in our context. When we thought about releasing exemplary teachers and having them be deployed, we actually didn't want them to be from the school that they were teaching in, but more to give the new teachers more sort of confidence or a sense of sort of safety, that no one was going to be talking about them in the school, that they could sort of have this stance where nobody really, it wasn't like the teacher next door was also mentoring them and seeing what they were doing in their practice. But some of you might already be really opening up your classrooms to visitations and lots of practices happening and making teaching public. I mean, that's the whole idea, right? And so these kinds of coach visits, I think, could also be led by someone on your staff, as long as you're building this rigorous selection, you're building out the capabilities of the coach. Sometimes we hire coaches, we may do a rigorous selection, and then we forget to give them the training. But really, working as a classroom teacher is different than working as a instructional mentor, or sometimes I see some of you use the word coach. I use them interchangeably, but I think that regardless, that the kind of training and then feedback on the coach, we actually follow the coach into their classroom, into the practice. We observe them coaching new teachers, coaching their new teachers, and we give them explicit feedback in a collaborative way as well. And then, I hadn't mentioned this yet, and I'm going to move on in a second, but what do we see these mentors doing after they mentor for 3 years? Many of these mentors now want to become principals. Many of them can hardly wait to get back into the classroom to teach again. Many of them are interested in doing something in a district that's maybe related more to curriculum development or Common Core rollout or SEL work. Some of the mentors go on and get their PhDs or EDDs. I think that what we're good at in our profession is hiring more and more onto teachers, right? And we've chosen instead to have this very dedicated role. Now, I want to go back to something I said earlier for just a moment around principal buy-in. Principal engagement and buy-in has really advanced the mentoring in schools. The greater the principal's engagement, the better the stickiness of the mentoring, right? Because the principal is learning also. The principal is keen on being an instructional leader and also on being, able to really engage his or her staff in learning. Because a lot of the protocols and processes and assessment tools that we use are, though they're focused on mentoring and new teachers, they're actually great for a whole staff. And so we start to see a ripple effect, right? We see grade level teams saying, oh, we'd like to use that analysis of student work, or we'd like to use the collaborative log. And then we see even more buy-in, maybe the whole staff is using it. I mean, we've been working with a school mentoring new teachers in a school in Watsonville, California, and at a high school, and the whole high school now wants to use our Common Core literacy design for meeting the Common Core standards. So I think that what we're talking about, reflection, ongoing learning, improving practice, changing our practice, reaching all students, etc., these are all things that really talented teachers are engaged in all the time, and that we're just really fueling, if you will. So let me move on now to when we focus on leaders, our students succeed. Right? Earlier you saw when we focus on teachers, our students succeed. I never understood in my own career how important leaders are. Because, in the early 70s, my principals were only as talented as all the rest of the principals. And that was like really looking at bulletin boards and saying, nice job. And I'm sure there was some more advanced thinking in places, but that's what I experienced. And I didn't really understand it, and I think those of us that are teachers, and I consider myself a teacher, and I actually use the word teacher for all of us, quite frankly, principals, State Department folks, colleagues, all of us are teachers. But I think when those of us that have become teachers may not want to be principals because we love the act and art of teaching kids, right, or teaching teachers maybe. And somehow the principals have kind of, like if you became a principal, you were sort of going over to the dark side. Now I know that's not so common today. I mean, we're breaking that down. But the truth is we have to break it down. We need really talented teachers becoming principals. I mean, who else should be principals but the most talented in our schools? And what we're finding now is that these expert teachers who are being trained as mentors, they've seen what it looks like when we have adult learning opportunities and our mentor forums, and they say, wow, I think I could be a principal. And I think when we start working more closely together as I like to say in my organization, one NTC, whether you're in Chicago or you're in Durham, North Carolina, or you're in LA, wherever you are in this country, one NTC. I'd like to say one school, all of us caring about improving student learning. So let me talk with you just a little bit about our principal development work. Our theory of change is very, very similar to our theory of change around improving student learning through teacher induction. Again, the outcomes on the right? We want improved student learning. We want a school to have much more improved teaching practice, improved conditions for teaching and learning, and a coherence that's aligned to district priorities. And we think the components of those, to really get that, you have to have the drivers in place, and you have to have the components in place. So let me talk about the components for a minute. Again, targeted coaching. So who's going to coach new principals? Well, sometimes, and in some places, new principals have the sink or swim method of principling, right? In our work, we've tried various models. We've tried using excellent retired principals, newly retired principals, to coach new principals. And in some districts, we're working with exemplary principals who've turned schools around and who have little teacher turnover and who are working in tough settings and who are pretty remarkable at leading adult learning communities. They're released full-time. And their job is to coach a subset of principals. But however you target the coaching, you have to remember to rigorously select. I mean, it's really no different, right? To use assessment data to drive principal development. We also have a Principal Induction Academy, a set of modules that really focus on instructional learning, right? Helping principals become instructional leaders, helping them observe and give feedback, helping them run professional learning communities, helping them facilitate learning, and then also some modules on some of the aspects of principling that I don't even know that much about. It's a good thing I'm not offering those, but really on using how to use your budget, how to manage your time, how to create a safe school environment, and those kinds of legal aspects of being a principal that are so critical. So the academy, the Principal Induction Academy is really rich, brings new principals together, and just like new teachers, they love being with each other. It's tough to be a new principal, and it is tough to be a new teacher. And then that district leadership development, really helping the leaders in the district create the context for principal success. I'm often amazed. I think about this all the time. When you're a big for-profit company or even a little for-profit company, you're trying to hire amazingly talented employees, right? So that you can, do good, hopefully, and stay in business and maybe make a profit. In our systems, we spend so much money on recruitment. And even if we get the right people in place, we forget that they need development. And people become discouraged. People have lots of other career opportunities, and they say, wow, why should I teach, or why should I be a new principal? Why should I be a principal? I'm just squished between the district office, the community, and my teachers. But there's ways to be a principal and to get the kind of support that principals need to really excel. And we think those program drivers, in addition to what I'd already said around the rigorous selection, is really using a formative assessment system, is getting total district buy-in. And one time I remember leading a session at one of these principal academies, and it was on professional learning communities. And I sort of was caught off guard by a question in the audience, saying, well, what kind of demands do you place on principals regarding their professional learning communities that they're establishing? Do you structure it? Is it planned in advance? And how do you hold principals accountable to those professional learning communities? And although I think there are some aspects of those questions that are important for us to be thinking about, our job is to help principals create learning opportunities in their schools, right? Where teachers are valued, where students are valued, and where the principal's knowledge is valued, and where the team is engaged in learning. And that there's a leadership team. I mean, I think if you try and do top-down PLCs, top-down induction, you're missing the learning. You're missing the inquiry into practice and the reflection that you guys wrote about earlier. These are huge aspects of talent development. And I think we can do so much better. And also, I think engaging students in this process. It's hugely important to be really listening to students. I mean, even in terms of teacher effectiveness, we use student surveys. We observe in classrooms just for student engagement. What are the students' perception of their principal? I mean, we really need to, I think, build this entire sort of holistic approach to learning into the system. And now let me, that was very quick on our principal work, and I'm happy to engage in questions about that. We only do principal development work in districts where we're already working with teacher induction. So a district might say to us, we'd really like you to work with us and build out a comprehensive induction program. And then they say, wow, this is great for principals as well. Could you help us? And I just seeing somebody's comment, and then I see an amen. I do think that PLCs have been hijacked, right? And I'm really, I am about, and our center is really focused on empowering teachers, empowering principals, empowering students to really engage in thoughtful inquiry into practice. And that has to be looking at sort of a relevancy today around learning that really engages students and isn't just focused on improving standardized test scores. Improving standardized test scores is one aspect, but it can't be the only driver to co-opt or to sort of build out PLCs. PLCs need to generate, from my perspective, from a group of teachers inquiring into their practice around a certain area. We need to empower our teachers. Okay, I'm going to keep going here a little bit onto looking at impact. And I just want to talk about impact for a second. I'll go to the next slide. Actually, it's bigger and it's more interesting. Well, it's the same, but it's bigger. Okay, so with our work at the New Teacher Center, we started off with 7 of us, and now we're 100 and, I don't know, I heard today actually we're 200, but I would have said about 175. We're about a $30 million nonprofit, and I think we're really developing Teachers for America, right? I mean, we're really focused on supporting the development of outstanding teachers, and all to improve student learning. And in order to really think about this, like, we've had to develop an impact spectrum. Like, we've had to get sharp on this. Oh my God, there's Linda Fink online. My goodness, one of my earliest student teachers at UC Santa Cruz in 1978, or I don't remember, Linda. Gosh, wow. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm looking at this, and we've had to really get our up our game, right? You have to play in the conversations. You can't run away. So we've had to up our game. So let's just look at the kind of metrics that we want to collect. So first of all, let's count, right? How many new teachers are we working with? Well, this year we're working with 15,000. Over 15 years, we've worked with hundreds of thousands of new teachers. What's the program quality? Can you grow a program if it's not high quality? No. Should you? No. I want every teacher in America to get support. None of this sink or swim. How do we really, so at the New Teacher Center, we're constantly monitoring the quality of our programs because we want to make sure that, first of all, what we're teaching mentors is really helping them support the development of their new teachers. We do not ever want to hear a new teacher say, I have to have a mentor. Our new teachers say, oh my gosh, my mentor's a saint, a guardian angel, helping me really develop my practice, right? Mentors, and mentors bring grade level teams together, and the teams are focused and they're humming. That's the kind of program quality we're looking to that ultimately improves and lifts the lives for kids. And yes, you have to keep teachers longer than 2 years and 3 years and 4 years. We have to. They're never going to get good, right? It takes years to become a really good teacher. And I want to see that through this kind of mentoring that we're talking about doing together, that teachers get better faster and stay longer. And then they become mentors. And then if they so desire, they become principals. And if they so desire, they become the superintendents, right? But that there's a career lattice and or ladder in and out of the classroom. That's another sort of strategy, if you will, that I talk about. Why do you have to just teach, become a principal, and then go higher and then go higher? Let's go in and out of these roles. Let's make our profession more fluid. And then, are we keeping teachers longer? I tell you that our research is showing that in almost every city that we're in, we're upping retention by 22%. I'm excited about that. Now, do we want to retain everyone? No, right? We want to make sure everyone has the kind of instructional support and due process and help they need, and hopefully they're going to show growth over time and move from good to very good to excellent. Are they changing their practice? So we're really looking carefully at practice, and we've identified a set of best practices that we think are critical, and we're looking to see those shift and be developed over time. And then let's look at student learning in terms of multiple measures and not only standardized test scores. So now I'm going to actually stay with my slide. I'm sorry. So practice, you can see that we survey every brand new teacher we're working with, 15,000 of them, new teachers across NTC programs, overwhelmingly report that mentoring improved their practice. 93% responded. Total, right? More than 93% responded, but of the total, 93% say that. I think listening to teacher voices, teachers don't just fill out surveys and put nice things. Teachers are the most critical of their PD, professional development, that they get. So they really value it. There's the retention you can see before NTC and after NTC. We are, in Hillsborough, we saw 22 percentage points. And student learning, remember I told you earlier that we had that Mathematica study with Steve and Steve Glazer at Mathematica, and what did we find? That we found that students that were taught by a teacher with 2 years of intensive induction, the kind of program we just shared with you, grew an additional 1 grade level in reading on standardized test scores, and an additional half grade level in math, as compared with students of teachers who received induction light. So I think we have to really stand up for the principles that we believe, and really be able to collect the kind of metrics that ultimately give teachers a picture and give let's say all the stakeholders of a picture of the power of the intervention. I'm sort of winding up, and I can see that I still have about maybe 10 minutes to keep talking, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to have a little bit more engagement with you, because I love questions and answers. Let me tell you sort of a couple of different stories. So remember Miss Hayward, my high school Spanish teacher? Well, about 3 months ago, I was sitting with one of my colleagues here that's half my age, and I said to her, Kelly, I really want to find Miss Hayward. Will you help me? She said, sure. Let's Google her. I'm like, oh, I've done that before, but I haven't found her. Oh, come on, let's go. Google her. So we found Miss Hayward. I could approximate her age. I remembered that when I was 18 in high school, I thought she was about 22. So I'm not telling you all the details now, but I went 4 years over my own age, and I found Miss Hayward. We found a person that looked like Miss Hayward who was living in the East Bay. It was Ellen Hayward, and 4 years older than me, and I said, Kelly, I think this is her. And we went and dialed this number, and I remember feeling, if you can believe it, more nervous than I am today. I was really nervous. I get nervous whenever I'm in front of a group, and I feel like I'm in front of all of you. I got so nervous I could barely dial the number. And I got this woman who said hello, and I asked her if she was Miss Hayward that taught Spanish at Monterey High. Okay, in 1967 and 68. And she said, I am. Oh, and I started to scream, and Kelly was screaming. I'm surprised the woman didn't think something crazy was going on. We both screamed. And once it calmed down, I got a chance to talk to her, and I got to say to her, thank you. There's just no way that I would have had the life I've had and the opportunities to impact so many new teachers and students across this country. Right now, this year, 1.5 million kids, mostly in underserved communities, if it hadn't been for you. And she said, wow. She just told me she remembered me. I don't really know if she remembered me. But I was just so struck. I said to her, so how long did you teach? She said, 2 years. I was lousy. It was really a hard job, and I really couldn't do it. And I was reminded that moment that I am not stopping this work, and I'm enlisting all of you to join us in making sure that every new teacher gets support. Now, see that young woman? In that picture, I had an opportunity where I flew to Boston about 2 years ago, and I got into my hotel, and I saw this email, and I opened it up, and it said, Dear Miss Moir. And I thought, my goodness, nobody calls me Mrs. Moir. Maybe it was a kid I taught in first grade or second grade. And this young woman said, I'm teaching, I won't tell you what city because I don't want to, anyway, I'm teaching in a school district. It's one of the toughest schools in the district, and I'm just drowning. And it was in October. I'm quitting. I can't do it. This is horrible. And I thought, no, you can't quit. And we have an office in this particular city, and we sent out someone to be her mentor. And then I thought, that story that this young woman is sharing with me, and she wrote me a big letter. I thought, I've read that story. I've heard that story over and over and over. I'm going to invite her to be a keynote with me at our symposium in February. So last February, I had her by my side. And what she said to the audience made them laugh hysterically and cry. First thing she said that I thought was so funny, she said, I said to my husband, Bill, there's an organization in America that cares about new teachers. And they say that new teachers in October go through a complete disillusionment phase. And at least I now know I'm not alone. That was one thing she said. The second thing she said is, I feel like a fraud in front of those kids. I really feel so bad. I'm not very good, and I'm trying to teach. I just feel like a fraud. They're so unlucky to have me. And the next thing she said as she sort of looked at all of us in the audience, she said, it's really hard to go in every day when you really don't feel like you're very capable. And that, for me, has just only continued to propel our work as well. As the leaders in school districts and in states we can do a much better job of helping teachers be successful. I really think that anyone in this country that's outside of the classroom teaching, their full-time job needs to be about being in service of supporting America's teachers. I think only then will we start to close the achievement gap. Let's build together to make our profession one that we'd want our own children to join, or our nieces, or our nephews, or our friends' kids, because it's the only profession in the world that can lift kids' lives and help them dream big and reach those dreams. So now I'd like to turn back to you, Elizabeth, and engage in 30 minutes of questions and answers, and there might even be some answers in the window that are even more brilliant than any that I even thought of. So I'm eager to both learn with you and to share any insights I have, and I'm super appreciative of having this chance to talk with all of you.
Okay, so before we get into that Q&A session, because I know there have been a lot of really wonderful comments and questions coming in throughout the session, I do want to take a few minutes to hear again from you as participants to find out really what was the one thing that grabbed you today, and what did you hear that you really want to take and apply to your own setting in the work that you do. So we're going to pop up another box, and I would like you to just type in a brief response of your key takeaway for today. I'm seeing a lot about leadership capacity, making sure that principals are buying in. To ensure that new teachers aren't getting defeated and run down by the system. I think people have seen a lot of different ways that new teachers can be supported, being in classrooms and really getting into the work with those mentors and the new teachers as partners. Really taking time for folks to reflect and think about what's happening in their classrooms and taking action based on their reflections.
Yeah, I'm looking at maybe alternative certification, and we can think about ideas around that. But you know, that really developing teachers is the whole system's responsibility.
Ellen, something else that really struck me was this idea of the career lattice. You know, we hear a lot about teachers who, you know, are looking for something different, but I saw in the comments throughout, you know, people don't want to step into the principal's role because there's challenges with that, but having this opportunity to do something else and share their love for teaching with other teachers is a wonderful opportunity for many.
I hope we're going to see that more and more. I think, you know, the idea of, I think in the 50s and the 60s, maybe the 70s and 80s, teachers taught for 30 years straight in the classroom. That was then. This is now. Young people today are going to have many, many different jobs. And I think the teaching profession has to get much more fluid and flexible and allow for this kind of lattice approach.
Okay, I'm going to just let the last few people make some comments into that box, and then we're going to move on to a new box where you can really truly ask your questions. We're really pleased to see you taking away a lot of valuable information, but it'll be wonderful for you to really open up, and although we're not going to unmute the line, you're still going to be asking your questions through the chat feature. Ellen will be able to respond directly to the questions you still have. So here in this slide, you'll see Ellen's contact information and the website for the New Teacher Center, and you can find a wealth of information there to learn more about the programs she's working with and to be in touch with her. I know we'll also share her personal contact information towards the end. So now we're going to jump into our question and answers, and like I said, I saw so many wonderful things being written about in our questions box throughout the session, and I know that there are many of you who still have questions that you'd like answered. So we're going to pop up that box now, and you're only going to see your own question on the screen, but we're going to be filtering through those and presenting some to Ellen if she has not yet been able to answer them through her presentation, and she'll get the chance to respond to the things you're asking. If there are any questions that we don't have time to get to, we'll be putting all of the ones we do respond to and any others into an FAQ document that will go up with all of our materials on the REL Mid-Atlantic site, and you'll get a link to that once the session is complete. We'll email that to you. So you can start asking some questions now, and I'd also remind you that if you do need to leave the webinar early, make sure you complete the feedback survey, which is in the bottom right of the screen. I know some folks are asking if they could get copies of some of the materials that you discussed, Ellen.
Yeah, so, most of our assessment tools we've kind of hung on to so that they're part of a system and not sort of one-offs. And really also, honestly, because sometimes people would take some of our assessment tools, because early on we did give away a lot, and then they'd say, well, we're doing the New Teacher Center model, and then that would hurt us because maybe it was just using one of our assessment tools. But I'm happy to sort of share them so you can see what they look like, and they would say draft on them or whatever, but you're welcome to at least take a peek at them. And, if you email me at some point when you want to see something, I'm happy to do that. Has NTC had conversations with national associations for alternative certification? That's another, all these are great questions. I'm so glad. Just keep them coming, you guys. I love questions. So, I've been thinking a lot about alternative certification. The thing that gets in my own personal way is like I did certification at UCSC for 20 years or something like that, and certification and meeting these certification agency guidelines is like a lot of very in the weeds kind of things that are compliance oriented. But having said that, though, I'm going to just be honest with you. I think that somewhere, someday, someplace, sometime, we're going to see a 6-week or 8-week upfront summer partnered with NTC over the first 2 years of teaching. And I think that, it'll be another model of alternative certification. Like, I'm a proponent of alternative certification. I'm a proponent of high-quality, great teacher preparation, whether it's alt-cert or not. I haven't had conversation with the national associations yet, but it is something that we're definitely considering. And how do you balance the two with alt-cert? Well, it just depends on what the alt-cert program is. So in the residency model, let's just say some of those residents, are placed with master teachers, and then the next year they're in they're teaching, right? Sometimes those residencies partner with us to help build out a better induction program, and sometimes they do their own. Sometimes alt-cert programs have people coming from universities or colleges or Teach for America, right, to help new teachers. I think that that's great. NTC's work is about being in classrooms every week over the course of 2 years with expert teachers teaching teachers. So many times when we're in systems and districts and they have a whole system approach to developing their new teachers, we help all new teachers regardless of the path they come from.
Ellen, I see another question about recruitment, and I this one come in a couple of times through the session, but we're looking at how do you recruit mentor teachers, and you talked a little bit about it being by content area and grade level, but could you talk a little bit more about the recruitment process for folks?
Absolutely. So we work with a school district and we do a couple of things. One is that, we put together a job description of what the mentor role looks like. We often host an orientation, so we try and get everyone, as many teachers that might be interested to come to hear an orientation, an overview of what the program will look like and what the job will look like. You see, really talented teachers, all teachers, are a little afraid to just leap and go forward with something new because they don't know. They might leave the school that they love. They might leave the grade level that they love, right? And they're not sure this will be built to last. So really, we do an orientation. We look over 3 years to the best that we can. We talk about how then it's a rotational approach. Most school districts like the rotation approach because we're trying to build more capacity into the system. Sometimes the district says, well, we want the same person out to the distance. That's going to be a district labor management decision. But we, then there's a period of time after the orientation when we collect applications and letters of recommendation. Some districts actually go and watch teachers teach. And then we host an interview process, and that interview process includes scenarios, role-playing, right? And really looks carefully at the capabilities the expert teacher brings around their good strong interpersonal communication skills, how they see themselves and demonstrate themselves as a learner, how they themselves can explain examples in their classroom, how they know their students well and use assessments. And we're looking for teachers that are really reflective, that are thoughtful, and away we go, right? They have to really demonstrate all those kinds of things. And then when they're given, and then once they are selected, then we move quickly into the first 3 days of professional learning. I'm having trouble actually seeing these show up. I mean, they come in pieces, but I can't see the whole question. I saw Peter has one. Wait, okay.
Yeah, I'll share with you Peter's because it's a great one.
Okay.
He's into knowing more about technology and online tools, and I know you briefly touched on it and said you weren't going to go too much into it, but could you talk to us a little bit about how NTC is leveraging the technology and online tools to support the mentoring process?
Yeah, I mean, this is huge for us. So we're just going through we just finished our strategic planning process with the Monitor Institute through our partnership with New Profit. And, our strategy right now is twofold. One, to grow from being in 24 of the largest 200 urban districts to being in 60 of the largest urban districts by 2018. And we want to grow our online presence from working with about 1,500 brand new STEM teachers and K-12 special ed teachers online to reaching 30,000. And I have a dream that someday any new teacher that needs help anywhere in America can get support from us online just in time. With the advent of new technologies, it's gotten more and more exciting. Like for a long time, we're not new at the online, right? We've been at this now for probably I said 8 years yesterday to someone. I was corrected. We've been at this for 11 years. Started with a NSF grant. We partnered with NSTA, the National Science Teachers Association, and Montana State. We loved that partnership, and we learned. We had Horizon Research beside us, and we learned really well what works and what doesn't work. And let me just say this to you. I think you've all picked this up already, right? We're educators. We're about educators teaching educators and valuing and honoring teaching and teaching profession. And we have a secret sauce. I don't mean to sound silly. Well, we have a secret sauce, and that secret sauce we take online as well, right? So we have an inquiry approach to online learning. It's not didactic, it's not top-down, it's an inquiry. It models the kind of reflective practice that we're talking about. And in doing that work now with the capabilities of technology, we can actually, like I said earlier, we can see the teachers teaching in their class. One of the things that was missing for the first 8 or 9 years was we were listening to the teachers, right, and the mentors, and they were exchanging ideas and lessons, and the teachers could be in a cohort together, but we never really could see the teachers teach. And now we can see them, and we can give them feedback. And since most new teachers are either in urban or rural America, it makes sense for us to really wrap our arms around some small rural districts. We're going to build out our capabilities, and we already have them built out in math and science. We're going to get into oral language development, which we have, which we think is a huge predictor for this large pre-K population, right? And early literacy, and then really look at numeracy, K-6, build out social studies and English at the secondary level, embed Common Core, and embed our social emotional learning work. Like I don't want to skimp on any of the various components that make for a successful new teacher. And I think that the online platforms now allow us to do that work much better. Now, is it going to develop the same human capital capacity, right, the talent that you could see when we wrap our arms around a whole system? I don't think it will, but I have an eye on trying to make it much more robust and as more of a change agent possibility by actually including a bit of face-to-face in the online environment.
Thanks, Ellen. You touched on, there's been a couple other questions coming in, and a lot of the questions do relate to people feeling isolated in their roles in their schools or districts. And I think you just shared some of the ways that you're thinking forward about that and how to set up some structures so that those elements can be available to not only the districts that you're working closely with, but to folks everywhere. So I think people are yearning for that.
I think that's right, Elizabeth. I think, look, it's teaching is really isolating, and I think the way you keep teachers will thrive the most when they feel like they're being supported and that continuous learning is happening at their edge of the seat and they're excited, right? More money would be nice and better conditions are obviously important, but, in the end of the day, teachers want to be valued and have a chance to really be thinking and learning and using technology. Hey there, Kay Livingston from Scotland, because one of you, well, I'll finish this and then I'll go to Scotland. So I think, that online provides these communities of practice that actually can be as robust as they can be with a PLC face-to-face. So we're really testing all of these out. Can I just comment, Peter, I'm delighted that you're going to be working with us in Chicago. It's fantastic. We have a terrific staff in Chicago, and getting your knowledge and expertise and building out our modules will be terrific. And Kay, one of you asked this question, I didn't ever get to answer it. It was like, the question was, I wonder if NTC has also looked at teacher support in some countries, like in Scandinavia, where teachers are apprentices for much longer than teacher colleges. And, I'll turn to my colleague Kay, has been a professor and leading this work through the University of Glasgow and through other organizations in Scotland. And I think that there are many other countries, Finland, Singapore, new teacher centers working in Scotland and Finland and Singapore. And, all those countries, the context matters in the way that they're, the way that teachers are being revered. I'll never forget this. Like when I went to the International Summit that Arnie Duncan hosted in New York a year or two ago, I heard the Minister of Education in Finland. This is how she started. In Finland, we value our teachers. I'm like, that is the message that America's teachers need, and then we need to not just have a message, but we need to actually operationalize that and walk our talk so that we create opportunities that really let teachers know on a regular basis how important they are. I mean, look, I just have one son, but I can tell you, when that kid went off to kindergarten, what do you think I was thinking about? Like, all I could think about is he going to get the best teacher that's going to love him as much as I love him and that's going to see how brilliant he is right? You know what I'm saying, right? I mean, we want really talented teachers. And I just think that, you know, if we could create a movement across this country that started to look more like what I see in Finland and in Scotland and other countries where your teachers are really revered and trusted. And then if we could build better teaching and learning conditions and up our salary, I think we could actually really kick the ball out of the park or hit the ball out of the park. I better figure it out however we're doing this work. Go Giants, sorry. Like you can see, some of my son has rubbed off on me, I guess. So I think, let's see, another question, but I just want to just say that technology is extending our reach. And, you know, some technology is being developed by small startup companies that, you know, have a brilliant idea and are looking for a fit, right, an audience. In our case, we have an audience, and you all have audiences. We have teachers. Teachers are hungry to learn and grow. So I think, you know, either using a startup to get that startup to deliver the services that we need and want, or find your own engine within the district or a partner that can really deliver online what you can deliver. You start to approximate what we can deliver face-to-face.
Ellen, I think we have time for about one more question, and I have one that came in with someone asking about, we know that at the beginning of the year is overwhelming for a brand new teacher, and it's overwhelming as well for the mentors who are trying to get them up to speed on all these things that they need. And so the question is, how should mentors prioritize and think about what order to do things in and how to approach this time period with their new teacher?
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's great. So, you know, I think one of the things, if you think about the beginning of school, the thing that is on a teacher's mind more than anything else is how do I get going, right? I'm going to have kids in a week. I'm going to have kids tomorrow. What is it that I'm going to say and do? What curriculum? What's my first day of school's curriculum? What's my first week's curriculum? What's my first month's curriculum? And I think one of the areas that I think we kind of traditionally do that I really don't ascribe to is we bring new teachers together and we fill them up with 3 or 5 or 7 days of training. But we forget that these new teachers just came out of pre-service or an alt-cert program and they're ready to go. I think we'd be better off helping them get going. So right from the get-go, you know, we do maybe a 1-day orientation so they know about the program, they know about what we can offer them, and we actually help them plan their first day of school. And just get in there and be useful, right? So if you're going to bring teachers together, make sure it's on, you know, advice on how to do the first 2 days, how to do the first week. I mean, I think new teachers need it chunked, not in small modules, so to speak, because otherwise it's super overwhelming. So our mentors actually are not overwhelmed because we kind of demystify this with them, and we try and sort of layer out and sequence what needs to come first. And I would just say, you know, after maybe 3 or 4 weeks, we're ready to really bring new teachers together then and maybe have a 2-day training on, say, classroom management or an online program. And don't forget, we're giving this new teacher feedback every week and maybe twice a week, so it's not like we're just letting them get off on the wrong footing. We're really trying to be proactive and help them think forward to how to be successful those first few days, because you know if you don't get off on the right footing in the first week or so, you're in trouble. So I think rather than filling them up so much, I would let them do a lot of talking and thinking about their first few days of teaching and how to set up a room environment that'll be engaging, whether it's in a high school math class or in a kindergarten class. And then really make sure they have the tools, they know their way around the school, they know all the key people to talk with, they're good at thinking about their planning, they have their, they know the grade level standards. I mean, there's a host of things that you just need to really hone in on early. But again, not to overwhelm them, just to take these in small modules. I think that's the most useful that we've found.
Thanks so much, Ellen. I think we're going to wrap up the Q&A session now, do a few housekeeping things to close out the webinar. But, it's been so wonderful for all of us to have this opportunity to spend the last 2 hours with you. you're one of the leaders in this field, and I think that everyone can walk away with something really amazing to take back to their own practice. I hope that the participants would agree with that. Like we've already mentioned, if you have questions and want to continue this dialogue, continue the communication with Ellen or with our team about ways you can continue this work, build on this work in your district, in your school, all of us would be welcome to answer those questions and continue the dialogue with you. This next screen, you'll find our contact information, myself and Ellen. And I'll also remind you that...
Elizabeth, can I just chime in for a second? If you want to contact me directly, that is info@New Teacher Center, and I always get those, but I always get them a little late. If you want to just email me direct, just do emoir@newteachercenter.org, and I'm happy to hear from any of you.
Great, thanks, Ellen. I'll also point out that in the resources box down at the bottom, you have a copy of the PowerPoint. You also have a link to 2 videos. I'd encourage you to take a look at those videos because one of them is really a great resource to see mentoring in action. So if you want to learn more about what this looks like, and you've heard a lot about it today and you're having trouble thinking about what does this look like in practice, there's a great video there that can help you with that. The last thing I'll remind you is that we do have a feedback survey down in the bottom right. We'd ask you to take a minute and complete that survey. Your feedback is really valuable to our team and to Ellen in improving our webinars and to hearing from you about what are the things that you want to see more of, what support do you need in your practice, and how can our team work to bring some of those things to you. So please make sure you give us your feedback there. And now we're going to be wrapping up our webinar.